Hi everyone, I'll be doing a short video today, and this time I'll be talking about the do's and don'ts in MUET essay writing. MUET stands for Malaysian University English Tests. In this video, I'll only touch on three main things. Number one, task expectations. Number two, the things that you should practice when you are writing your MUET essay. And number three, the things that you should try to avoid when you are writing your MUET essays. Now, in MUET essays or academic essay, what we are normally expected to do is to write for about 5 paragraphs, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. Sometimes, good students may be able to elaborate a lot, and it is possible that they only have time for 2 main body paragraphs. If these 2 paragraphs are well elaborated and supported, it is still acceptable. In this MUET essay, you are expected to give a stand, whether you agree, disagree, or partially agree with the question statement. State your opinions, justify with relevant arguments and examples in a matured manner. Now let's get on to some tips or the do's when we start writing our MUET essay. Firstly, read the question and analyze carefully. If you see the question statement, start to identify the keywords in the question statement. You need to be able to use these keywords continuously in all 5 paragraphs in your essay. After that, start planning with 3 main ideas. These 3 main ideas would definitely be used in your body paragraphs, and this planning stage would be reflected when you start writing your thesis statement, which is in your introduction. As you write your essay, remember to time yourself. It is definitely a good practice to keep your time below or at maximum 50 minutes. So this is what I propose. Firstly, plan your essay for about 2 to 3 minutes. If you need longer time to think, then perhaps try to keep it down to maximum 5 minutes of planning. Train yourself also to write an introduction with about 4 to 5 sentences and keep that to 5 minutes. Of course, when you first start writing, it is rather impossible to write an acceptable introduction within 5 minutes. However, with practice, you will become more expert in writing a standard introduction in which you are expected to give about 2 to 3 general statements, a stand, and a thesis statement. Once you finish your introduction, go on with your 3 body paragraphs. Use approximately 10 minutes for each paragraph. Of course, there is no hard and fast rule that says each paragraph can only be scoped down to 10 minutes. You may spend more than 10 minutes for the first paragraph and probably less than 10 minutes in the second paragraphs. Give and take, you should spend about 30 minutes plus minus in writing your body paragraphs. When you move to your conclusion, again, take about maximum 5 minutes to write your conclusion. In fact, most people spend about 1 or 2 minutes writing their conclusion because you only need to summarize all your ideas, reaffirm your stand, and give 1 or 2 suggestions that would be sufficient. One crucial step after writing your essay is to read and edit. It is important for you to read through what you have written in order to minimize the errors that you might make. When you write your essay, I've mentioned before that the body paragraphs are actually the most important parts in your essay, and in the body paragraphs usually we hope that students would talk about why this issue happened and how this issue actually takes place, and hopefully give some realistic examples to justify the arguments. I would also advise students to try to use current issues as your examples to showcase your maturity and your general knowledge. Try not to go to mundane examples or repetitive examples. So keeping yourself up to date with current issues is definitely a good practice in preparation for your writing skills. Point number 5, again, I would like to highlight to you to read and edit your finished essay. Take about 5 minutes, or you may even need longer, but it is very important because you need to check and edit careless spelling and grammatical errors. Sometimes you may want to add 1 or 2 sentences to make your essay or paragraphs flow better. This step is actually pivotal to help to improve your MUET marks. Now let's take a look at what we should avoid or what we should not do when we are in MUET Task 2 essay writing. First of all, when you read your question statement, don't change the subject or the object. Changing any part of this would result in an off-tangent essay. So very quickly, let's take a look at the example that I've provided on the left column. The question goes, youths need pressure to be successful. Youths need pressure to be successful. Once you've identified your keywords, youths being the subject and pressure being the object, stick to these two and try not to make too many changes. Of course, you're allowed to paraphrase, but paraphrasing does not mean changing the subject or the object. So what do I mean by that? For example, when you start writing, you write about people in general need pressure, or the elderly need pressure. This would have changed the subject and is not required by the question. Changing the group of youths into elderly people or people in general would mean you have gone off tangent. Similarly, when you come to the object, which is pressure, stick to this word or paraphrase into other words that carry the same meaning. For example, stress. Once you try to change the object into some other aspects, for example, youths need self-discipline to be successful, or youths need patience to be successful. Very obviously, you have gone out of topic again, because we should only focus on the object, which is pressure. So remember, don't change the subject or the object in your MUET essay. All you need is to prove or to argue. The second point is to avoid giving suggestions or being didactic. Being didactic simply means you try to give advice. The very motherly advice given is not what MUET essays normally ask you to do. However, you need to read the question carefully. It is also possible that certain questions may need you to give sound suggestions, and you need to make that decision within the first 5 minutes when you plan your essay. When you analyze and find that the question does not need advice, stick to this point. Keep your suggestions to your conclusion. For your introduction and 3 body paragraphs, stick to what the question needs you to do, which is to give your reasons and how something happens. The third point is to avoid lengthy introduction, simply because we are racing against time. If you write a page-long introduction, which may be impressive, you may penalize yourself because your body paragraphs may end up being very short, and it will cause your grading to be lower. Point number 4 is it is not necessary to use bombastic words. Obviously, it is good to impress the readers with good and effective use of vocabulary. However, wrong use of bombastic words can cause bad impression instead. So be very careful with your word choice. If you are not very sure that a word, especially a difficult word, is correctly spelled or correctly used, maybe you want to consider going for something simpler but correctly and accurately being used. Last but not least, never give up in writing your essay. Sometimes students panic and only write for about 2 paragraphs and that's it. Again, you are penalizing yourself when you don't write in a full-length essay. So what my advice is, don't hand in very short essays or quit simply because you don't understand part of the question. So for example, if you are not very sure what the meaning of pressure is, it doesn't mean you can't write the essay. At least you still understand the word used, successful. So maybe you can write something about successful youths, and you might write about the qualities. Along the line, hopefully, you might have touched a little bit on pressure, and that would have given you some marks because you have hit the nail. So hopefully what I've shared with you about the do's and don'ts in MUET essay writing would help you to focus a little bit better. In my future videos, I hope to share more about tips on writing effective body paragraphs and effective introduction. See you again in future videos. Bye.